Welcome to Travel Buddy, presented by Switchfly. In this podcast, we talk about all things travel, rewards, and loyalty. Let's get to it.
All right, summer trends for vacationing. Everybody is currently planning or has planned their summer travel. I know Ian's got some coming up we might talk about. So how do these trendy places that people are traveling and putting on their calendars, how do they get there? There's a lot of, if you Google where should I go this summer or where are people going this summer, especially for you loyalty and program managers out there who are designing some of these programs for travelers, where are people going? How do you know? And so there's lots of publications out there. There's Condé Nast, there's Fora, there's, of course, Switchfly data that you guys present some really amazing stuff on your website about. But how does it get there? And what's real? Is it just trendy for trendy's sake, or is it really where actually people are traveling? So Rachel, I'll turn it over to you real quick. What are some trends you're noticing, and how does that data get there? What do you guys look at when you're thinking about what is the popular destination for summer travel?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So obviously we have Switchfly data that we take a look at, and then we, like everyone else, when planning our own travel, take a look at other publications. Condé Nast, Fora, Amex put out another top destinations report as well. And I think, specifically for this conversation, we took a look at what is at the junction of all of them. Like, what is the overlap of these? And it's important to note that Fora has their top destinations based off of their booking data. Switchfly has our booking data. Condé Nast uses, reviews and surveys that help kind of gather the top destinations of where people are going. So all of these different publications and different booking platforms have different sources of data. And the reason we took the approach to kind of take a look at all of them is because we wanted to boil down, okay, where are people really going? Where across all of these different sources, all of this different booking data, where are people really going? So for 2026, we saw a couple of intersections between all of these publications, and the big theme is that people are moving primarily from cities into secondary or regional exploration. This is showing up as recommendations across those publications and booking data in places like Panama or Morocco, or lesser known Japan was a popular one. And some of the other mountain destinations were really overlapping between Amex, Condé Nast, Switchfly data, and Fora. And what this means when I take a look at it is that people are really focusing on immersion and experiences that feel personal, and lesser so I want to go look at the Eiffel Tower, which, don't get me wrong, Paris is wonderful.
I love Paris.
In the infamous words of Audrey Hepburn, Paris is always a good idea. But
have a plate that says that. Yes. Love it.
So really, though, what we're seeing for summer 2026 is that there's a focus on this immersion and experiences that feel really personal or unique, that no one else is going to be able to experience them. So a lot of that off the beaten path and nature destinations being incorporated as well, like the Himalayas, Costa Rica, Patagonia, things that are a little bit more outside of the norm are coming into play a lot here. One of the other things that is pretty unique for this year is that it is America 250. And regardless of what's going on, there is still a pretty heavy uptick in travel around July 4th, especially in America. And we're seeing a lot of summer travel specifically to historic cities. So Philly, DC, Boston, the historic triangle as it's referred to in Virginia, which is Williamsburg, Jamestown, Yorktown, really focusing on July. And one of the things that I thought was fascinating was Hotel Planner actually reported that there's a 108% increase in hotel bookings for July 4th weekend over last year, which shows that despite, what may or may not be going on in the world, people are still wanting to travel to celebrate this and take advantage of some of the events that are going on.
You know what that means is fewer people are going to be traveling to Paris because they're going to be going to Philly.
And it must be a great idea. Is Paris becoming an off the beaten path this summer?
So something when I was kind of poking around looking at some of the data that is showing up is exactly that international airfare out of the US right now is down 10% year over year. And a lot of Southern Europe travel destinations are seeing a decrease as well due to a whole host of factors, but things like the cool locations, right? People don't necessarily want to go to somewhere hot. So you see Northern Europe getting a little bit of an uptick, but the sort of historically popular Southern European destinations aren't as popular this year, at least not so far. I think there's a few kind of main reasons. The oil prices are obviously higher at the moment than they have been over the last few years. There's a lot of uncertainty around that, a lot of political uncertainty in general. I think that's driving some of this, as well as just locally in places like Spain and Italy. There are some internal pressures against foreign tourism, right? There's been some laws passed in Spain around who can and cannot use their home for like Airbnb purposes and things like that, to really try to decrease some of the tourism in some areas. And I think that's kind of causing a lot of people to maybe drift away from some of those more historically popular spots to some of the places that, like Rachel was mentioning. But yeah, just sort of overall, Southern Europe is kind of less popular this year, at least so far, than it has been historically. And I think, that might be a trend that continues, at least for this year, and maybe even going in the next couple of years, depending on kind of how a lot of different factors shake out.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things that are driving some of these trends, but I wonder if, maybe anecdotally is driving some of these trends, because maybe the kids these days would call it travel maxing. You're looking for something unique and like, hey, I'm doing this thing that's off the beaten path. But also like AI and some of these other tools are probably giving more creative ideas that people haven't considered before. And also like, well, if I've got a travel guide in my pocket, then I don't need to stick to the most, travel destinations around the world. I can actually I can find my own way. I can get a translator on my phone or whatever if I get stuck, and just kind of unlocking some of these ideas for folks for traveling.
Yeah, I mean, to your point regarding using other sources like AI, etc., to help plan trips. One word of caution I would still put out for travelers is that Google, LLMs, etc., it doesn't matter what your query is, they are still going to surface the thing that has the highest rankings, because that's where information is being pulled from. It's pulling from people who are optimized the most to rank in those things. So in reality, you may be trying to find something that's super off the beaten path, but at the end of the day, it's still going to serve you what is ranking the highest. And I know you got into this conversation on our last episode with Carrie regarding AI and travel and spontaneity in particular. And so I would just, as a word of caution, if you are really looking for the off the beaten path, AI is a good resource to help plan things, but make sure you're still leaving some wiggle room to actually experience the destination.
That's right.
Yeah, I
think Paris is always a good idea. So.
Paris is always a good idea.
That's a great point. I think so 20 plus years ago, 25, 30 years ago, we started seeing this dramatic reduction in the travel agent industry, right? As the internet became more and more common to use, there was a pretty much direct correlation between the sort of decline in number of travel agents and the increase in being able to do much of that yourself, right? Through Google and Priceline and Switchfly and all the other travel booking platforms. I think what AI is going to help do is be able to increase the personalized nature of travel agents, but self-serving, right? You're totally right, Rachel. Like, anything on the internet, it's really hard to get to the bottom of like whatever topic you're searching. In this case, like the least or lesser traveled destinations, just because there's less information about it, right? So it's a little self-defeating. But with AI, and I'm sure, we do this internally with Switchfly as far as using AI to provide recommendations to people based on personalized interests and things like that. I'm sure those tools are just going to get more and more complex and be able to weed out a lot of that kind of influencer led stuff that ranks really highly just because they're professionals who do this daily and know how to do that. So I do have hope that AI will be able to kind of provide people a little bit more personalized experiences and to the point of like find lesser traveled destinations. You see that a lot with any kind of search. Just in general, if you're doing a search for travel right now, there are a lot of places, as the internet has gotten more ubiquitous and AI is taking over, there are a lot of places that, probably 10 years ago you weren't necessarily hearing about. But because of things like Instagram and Twitter X and all the others, somewhere out of the way, a, bed and breakfast that's off the beaten path is able to kind of get their name and face out there, maybe in ways they weren't able to before. So I think we'll still see that continue and hopefully democratize the travel destination experience a little bit more.
Yeah, that's right. I could see the argument that, AI, this is the last thing I'll say, we don't have to talk about AI the whole time, but is that, it makes a normal distribution of data. So if you get a ton of data, it's always going to go for the most average thing because it's just statistically guessing the next most likely word. But the edge that it would have is that it could know a lot of personal context about you. And so if I were to use Claude in a particular way to search for travel, it knows stuff I've been talking to it for 2 years. It's got all this memory associated with me, so it could maybe suggest some things that might be a little unusual that I wouldn't think of myself. So
yeah, and
anyway,
as people get more functionally literate with it, and you can develop your own projects and GPTs and whatever, and you can guide it to focus on more of those bottom of the bell curve data points. So I definitely think there's some pretty cool stuff coming as far as like travel related recommendation and things. I will say one more thing before we move on to the next point of there's a reason places like southern France and the Bahamas and Tokyo and certain places are the most highest traveled to locations always, and it's because they're really nice, and they have a lot of really nice stuff for people wanting to go adventure, to go see something. So
there's something for everyone.
Don't count out like commonly visited places. Like there's a reason they're commonly visited, right? I think that can get a little, and this is totally like personal anecdotal of just like personal preference. I get kind of annoyed at times of like when I get those videos that pop up that are like, oh, this little hidden whatever out of the way. I'm like, well, I'm going to, because I want to look at the Coliseum. Like I'm not going for, like, I can find a nice little bed and breakfast that nobody goes to within an hour of my house, like I'm sure it's beautiful. I'm sure it's fun. But when I'm vacationing, I kind of want the like big, cool stuff that makes my life, easy and is fun to do. So, you don't always have to go off the beaten path.
Yeah.
We are all tiny economists maximizing the little value that we have in our tiny little trips.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Ian, you bring up a really good point about like why are the hot spots that are on the Fora Condé Nast, Amex lists. Why are they there? Outside of like booking data and everything, the things that we see, no matter the year, no matter what's going on, is that, to your point, Southern Europe, Japan, Northern Europe, etc. These hubs of travel are still there, and they're still, taking a nice chunk of the share of travel for the next, for summer in particular. But it's not just because there are people like you and me who want to go see history and like the most accessible history that exists for us, but it also comes into play. They're on the hotspot list because of things like currency exchanges are simpler, or flight accessibility, or, social media. We can get back to the influencer comment you made earlier, Brandon, but or social media amplification is like, when you think of a city, we'll use Rome because you're going to Italy. When you use the idea of like Rome, there, you're going to be able to find a reliable flight there. It's got the infrastructure in place to be able to support travel in and out of the city, but also to support some of that tourism that exists. And there is that, like, this is a horrible way to say it, but like the underbelly of it, where you are seeing a rise in social media influencers at the hotspots telling you the secret things that exist around that area. So like, I think there's still a level of encouraging an off the beaten path experience, even if you're going to a hub, because it just, that's the theme that everybody is leaning into in order to create a personalized experience for their trip. But I think there's a lot of other factors that exist, like just simply accessibility to a point. When you think about the idea of an international traveler, going to another country that speaks a different language is an intimidating factor. And if they can rely on the fact that they can get in and out of the city very simply without needing to take additional transport somewhere else, that makes these locations a little bit more attractive for them to stay on the hot list. And then those who are looking for something a little bit more intimate can always, be a little courageous and take the train further out, or rent a car. I know, Ian, you're doing that. So like, there's still that opportunity for still seeing the more personalized experience of a Rome, a Japan, a Paris, or whatever. And that's why we're still seeing them on the hot list alongside some of these other newer, lesser traveled places.
Yeah, I think there's like, that's an excellent point of like, not only are these places popular because they're beautiful and historic and whatever, they've just been refined over generations of tourism to be optimized for people to go to. The language and currency thing's a great example. If I'm going to Europe, I know I'm going to need euros. And that's it, right? Like, I can go to any bank around here and get a stack of euros and be fine. I know in Rome, there will be enough English language support for me to get around and do what I need to do, with my like 10-word vocabulary in Italian. That just the optimization of these places over decades, if not centuries, of catering to tourists are, when I mentioned earlier that international travel is down, and Southern European travel bookings are down this year, they're still near the top of the overall rankings, right? It's just year over year down several percent. That also, I guess, like one other point is, don't feel pressured, right, to do the off the beaten path. If that's not what you want. I'm not a hiker. I'm not, I don't mountain bike. I don't want to go swim out to some lost cave that only like 10 people. No, I want to sit on the beach with my cocktail and enjoy the sun and hang out with my wife. Like, know who you are as a traveler. Now, I will gladly take a day trip on some small train to go see something cool and out of the way. But remember, some of that stuff can also be very hard to get to. And if you're going for a week, or if you got certain things you want to do, you got to keep that in mind too. So,
Right. Yeah, we've all seen those videos on Instagram of the woman in the sundress, and she's like, I found this cute little area that nobody else knows about 3 hours outside of this central city. And so I took a ferry and then a train, and then we got in a canoe and paddled. And it's like, okay, lady,
right. Yeah.
I got a 10-month-old. That ain't happening.
No, exactly. I'm going on vacation to relax. Like I don't want to work in any way. Yeah.
Okay, so we mentioned a lot of different trends, but one I wanted to get your feedback on here, and Rachel, maybe I'll turn it over to you, is I wonder what you think about how folks can work nowadays, if that's extending or changing the way that people are traveling. So for example, if you've got Wi-Fi, for a lot of knowledge workers out there, they could go spend 2 or 3 weeks somewhere because they do, half of it a vacation, half of it working, and so they can kind of get more off the beaten path or change the way that they would travel otherwise, despite some of the things that we were saying. But I'm curious if that has a part to play in some of the data that you're seeing.
I want to say yes, ... The short of the long is yes. The ability to work and extend it, if you are going for a work trip, because you work internationally, whatever it might be, like you need to go meet with some clients and then extend for a little while. That is definitely a plus with the way that, the workforce infrastructure exists today, because we have so many points of accessibility. Like I can bring my laptop along if I happen to be going to, I don't know, we have a couple of coworkers going to Toronto over the next couple of weeks. Let's say one of them wanted to stay for the weekend after the work trip is finished and explore a little bit more. They have that capability because they have all of the things that they need to do in order to do the job while they're traveling for work. And if they needed to extend it, they had the ability to work there because, most places, most being, italicized in that way, have access to Wi-Fi, or at minimum, you could hotspot in or something along those lines to tap in without using all of your PTO. I would say that remote work overall also gives the ability to work from different places so long as your company allows for it. There's definitely an uptick in individuals who are taking on this nomadic lifestyle where they have a job that supports the ability to work from anywhere. And you see them go work a month in Peru, or, they're traveling all over the United States from their van because what they do allows them to do that. So I would say, yes, it is definitely changing the way people are traveling and some of the things that they're able to do. I don't know that the ability to work remote is directly affecting these like hotspot lists, where are people going in 2026, and in my opinion, at least, simply because it really is focusing on like the summer travel upticks, and the business traveler and Bleisure overall, as it's referred to, is more of a consistent thing. It's less about traveling when others are traveling and when there's peak travel timeframes like summer, and it's more about the ability to take your everyday on the road. So we see it kind of take on that consistency throughout the year rather than, contribute to any of these hot lists that we're talking about.
Yeah, fair. That makes sense. One more piece of data, or source of data, if you will, comes from Switchfly's head of sales, who happens to be a travel agent, travel advisor. Can you talk about what some actual bookings and data that she has on the ground, talking to people and planning their trips, and how that might play into this as well? And then we'll bring it home, talk about travel loyalty program managers after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So unfortunately, Ashley wasn't able to join us today. She was really excited, but she's feeling unwell. But she did leave us with a couple of notes just in her experience. She is a travel advisor on the side. And some of the things that she's seeing overall is the people are trying to book more unique excursions and boutique hotels and really lean into that Instagrammable feel, which I have a thought on after we get done with this thread. And then one of the things that she's really noticing and from a just general theme is trying to be cognizant of some of these recommendations on these lists. So if you think about some of the cities that the Condé Nast list, the Fora travel list, etc., are promoting, they may not have the infrastructure of Rome and Paris. And when you think about an experience and how so many people, including influencers, but like so many different sources are pushing this idea of off the beaten path, just be prepared for, if you do want to experience that the places you go may not have the infrastructure you expect based on other hotspots that you've been to. And
if I could interrupt, is that
yeah.
is that to say, like, let's say I've had this experience, we talked about it before on the show, where it's 2 a.m. and your 3-year-old gets sick and you got to go to a doctor or a hospital or something like that. If you're way out there, you may not have that luxury. Is something kind of what she's talking about?
Yeah. So that, and just being cognizant of every time you travel, you are going to someone else's home. And that's something that we've talked about in the past, just being cognizant of that. And some people live in a New York City, a Rome, a Tokyo, places where there's already hundreds of thousands, millions of people that exist, and an uptick of travelers to those areas may not be noticed as much. It's funny. One of the things that she and I was talking about, we were talking about, is this idea that influencers, they are meeting the data. They are, as they are going and exploring certain places and putting it out there on social media and pushing this idea of off the beaten path, or I found this cute little cafe 3 hours outside of the city and needed to take a gondola, train, and something else to get there. That little cafe may not be ready to service thousands of people that may want to experience the same thing the influencer is experiencing. So from the perspective that she and I were talking about, it's more just about being cognizant that not all places have the same tourism infrastructure readily available. And sometimes places are recommended based on booking data, reviews, influencers, etc., that are just simply not prepared to take on that uplift in tourism, and just being conscientious of that as you are traveling. So that was a big takeaway from some of our conversations regarding this topic from her. All that to be said, she did also leave us with a smart alternative destination for some of the hot spots that we're seeing. So one of the things that she mentioned was, if you are looking to do something off the beaten path that can still hold a level of infrastructure from a tourism perspective, she's recommending Albania for the Mediterranean coast instead of Italy. She mentioned that it's affordable, the accommodations are very good, and it has a beautiful coastline. So I think when you combine the two thoughts that I just rambled on about, at least be cognizant, if you are going to go off the beaten path, ensuring that you're doing so respectfully, and make sure that you're doing so knowing that if you happen to be going somewhere that doesn't have the tourist infrastructure, to be just cognizant and respectful of that. So
it's interesting. I've heard the same about Croatia. That lots of folks say Croatia's beautiful, just like Italy, if you will, quote unquote. But
Croatia is on our short list too, because we're big Game of Thrones fans, and they filmed a lot of their stuff there.
That's right.
Yeah. To Rachel's, to like an additional point on what Rachel was saying, is something else to think about is always remember that influencers are paid. They're not doing this for the love of the game, right? There is an incentive there. So just to kind of add on, like, make sure you're like cross-checking certain things, right? Don't necessarily take any one source for granted. That's probably the greatest thing the internet has given us, right? Is being able to get multiple sources of information. And if you can only find this one influencer talking about this thing, it might be legit, and it also might be that little B&B in the middle of nowhere that is giving them some money to say those things, and may or may not be true. So remember that any kind of influencer-led stuff they're doing it for their own self-interested purposes and not necessarily yours. So cross-check that stuff. And then to the point of the amenities available, I've been on every continent except Antarctica. That the biggest thing I've learned is just how easy we have it in the US, like how convenient everything is. Just in general, whether it's, Brandon's point of like, crap, I need to go to ER at 2 a.m, or, I'm having trouble with my credit card, or, whatever. We have it so incredibly convenient compared to basically anywhere else in the world. So just keep that in mind, keep plans in mind. I've been in the military for 18 years, so it's all sort of second nature to have like backup plans. And I was showing Rachel my nerdy spreadsheet for our trip coming up, and how, I have this hotel booked for here and this here, but I also have like, well, if this falls through, we're going to go here. And, so always just have backup plans in case. Carry cash, carry it in an inconspicuous place, right? Like there's just some basic travel things you should do anywhere, but definitely if going internationally.
Yep.
Always have a contingency plan.
That's right.
Yeah. But yeah, to Ian's point regarding influencers, I know internally we were talking about this and whether or not social media and influencers are leading the data or if they're reflecting it. And when you think about some of the lists that we pulled together to really take a look at some of these hot destinations, a lot of them are familiar because of social media already amplifying it. And to Ian's point, always work with the assumption that influencers themselves are not the first data point. There is potentially a brand behind them driving certain behaviors, certain recommendations, etc. So while influencers and social media are leading some of the data that we're seeing, and they are, stirring awareness that might be reflected in some of the surveys that Condé Nast is doing, or some of the recommendations that are on the travel advice subreddit, etc. Influencers may be the source of where that information came from. However, just know that they are not necessarily the first data point. And in reality, there is potentially something in play behind that is actually driving the recommendations and those certain behaviors. So really good point, Ian.
It makes me think of, related to Condé Nast, she's the creative director, if you will, of Condé Nast, Anna Wintour, who was the editor for Vogue for many years. And I watched her documentary, and there's, at one point, basically, you come to this realization that she was so powerful based on her influencer recommendations of what made it into the magazine or what became the trend for the season, that it oriented an entire industry based on her judgment or her taste or whatever. And you see that in these much smaller ways with these Instagram influencers, that they kind of set the tone for or have their taste or whatever it may be, their interests based on certain trends and so on. And that's okay. That's a good thing to listen to. And especially if several of your friends follow the same kind of influencer, you can actually talk about that thing together that you went and did. So there's this like social dynamic as well. Like an example is for us when we went to the Borough Market in London, there's this little strawberry stand that they dip strawberries in chocolate, and it was like made it into a viral video. And so when we went to London, we went and did that, and we felt like we were part of this like social moment, if you will. So some of that's kind of cool, but yes, they're definitely paid by those people. Yeah. So keep that in mind. But it can be a cool thing, but yeah, it's not the only data point for sure.
Yeah, and I mean to your comment regarding on tour and all of the powers that be that come behind some of these publications that individuals reference. I mean, I always think of the Devil Wears Prada, Miranda Priestley cerulean blue sweater. I'm like, anytime I see that scene, it just makes me realize that like there are people in the world who have such respect and such breadth of knowledge in certain things that like their whole identity becomes like what is trending. And it's very interesting to see how that trickles down in different industries, but particularly with travel in this instance.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's a nod against AI that sometimes human judgment and taste is still dominant and should be, you know, I think it's a beautiful thing.
I'm checking the subreddit before I'm going to ChatGPT, honestly.
Oh, 100%. Anyways, okay. Rachel, bring us home. Why does any of this matter for our listeners, especially those that are creating or designing these loyalty programs, designing travel programs, thinking about their employees or customers, and ways that they can design their trips or be thinking about their trips, especially as they come up for summer here soon?
Yeah. So, I mean, our listeners could be travelers themselves. It could be loyalty and program managers. But I mean, for our audience with Switchfly, it's important to note that the reason we're talking about why these hotspots lists and where everybody's going for summer 2026 really is so that you can plan effectively. If demand is concentrated, inventory pressure increases. So if everyone is booking for certain locations and everybody is trying to go to specific top 20 areas, it's going to become harder to travel and to promote for those things. So that the ability to redeem becomes more challenging. There's some pricing volatility that comes into play. And it's important to know and to keep a pulse on not just how people are traveling, whether they're renting a car and staying, you know, within the United States, if they're taking international or domestic flights, et cetera, but to also be aware of the locations that individuals are traveling to. And all of that is like really powerful data, booking data that most platforms are going to store, but it can, in the long term, help you serve better packaging options or recommendations for additional activities. So just be conscientious of what is trending right now, just because you can, one, lean into it if you are seeing a little bit of a lull in your summer bookings. You can lean into it from a promotional standpoint, but two, just understanding the ramifications that if demand is concentrated, things might get a little bit more challenging from a program side. And it's also very important that you tie it into some of the other internal data you may be collecting. So, for example, I know we talked about this in the past. Switchfly pulled together multi-year data for airlines, particularly to showcase when the travel peaks are and when booking peaks are. It's important to kind of have multifaceted layers when it comes to analyzing your data and understanding that one data point is not the full perspective. You need to be able to take a look at where are the top locations, but also, okay, when are people going to be traveling? So making sure that you have all of these different facts in front of you to make the most appropriate decisions from a promotional standpoint and a support standpoint.
Ian, any parting thoughts on to leave our listeners with?
No, I think Rachel's covered it. I think the key is just rely on data, but multiple sources of data, right? Like take historical data, to take historical data into account, but also, you know, look at trends, obviously, look at geopolitics, look at, you know, everything else to make really the best decisions. You can't solely rely on historical data. You really got to take all of it kind of into account. So
yeah. And you guys have some calendars, I think, for folks to check out. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I had mentioned the airline demand calendar that's under the resources on our site, but we'll ensure to include it in the show notes as well. And then the other is more for HR tech and employee rewards and recognitions programs. And it focuses on employee travel and when there may or may not be some burnout in your workforce that aligns with our travel booking data. So both are really valuable resources to apply with the overlay of like, okay, this is when we can anticipate some demand, and this is where, from the hot lists that we've mentioned, where people may be going, and making sure that that is all taken into account.
Awesome. You can find more at switchfly.com. Guys, thank you so much. I know folks are preparing for their travel, and this is a wealth of knowledge to be thinking about as they're planning. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Brandon.